Hey everyone! Welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today I'm going to be talking about how change comes when you chase a mission instead of a dollar. I am really excited to share this episode with you all because my guest this week has great energy, and I really enjoyed my conversation with her. Baylie Jean Beard is the host of the Gen Z Boss podcast, where she talks with people and gets their advice on a variety of topics, including business, finance, and careers. I certainly don't know enough about the world of finance, and Baylie is making these topics accessible to Gen Z, which is a mission I can definitely get behind. So, let's get started with this episode featuring Baylie Jean Beard.
Yeah, so my name's Miss Baylie Jean, full government name, Baylie Jean Beard. So the way I kind of started the brand like Miss Baylie Jean originally before I got into Gen Z Boss actually. So it started off like the summer that I turned 20. Had an existential crisis of like, oh wow, I'm kind of getting old, even though 20 years old isn't old. But I feel like for like Gen Z people, like I feel like the idea of getting like out of high school and starting college and getting older is terrifying. And so many political like leaders and like Gen Z influencers are like 16 years old. And so I started Miss Baylie Jean first, which was like a blog and a website. And I started like actually like putting my opinions out there, kind of using my voice more. And then it ended up like, I guess 6 months later, I had this idea of Gen Z Boss. The name came first. Didn't have an idea if I was going to do a podcast, a website. I had no idea. And then probably like the next 20 minutes, I was like driving for Christmas actually. I was like thinking about this and I was like, wait, it should be a podcast. I've been told by so many people that you should start a podcast. I have a lot of like not just opinions, but I'm the go-to person for business for like a lot of my friends for business advice. And I was like, so many people in Gen Z have all of these like questions like, how do you do finances? How do you budget? How do you interview? And I was like, I have these tools. And I know people who know more than me too. And like, I should combine those and make a podcast. So I started the Gen Z Boss podcast. It kind of was a mix between the two of like giving tips to people every week, doing research on my end, and then like presenting that research, and then also bringing in experts. I brought in financial coaches. I've also brought in other people like professional athletes to talk about stress management. And it kind of grew from there. So right now it's like at a space I'm kind of proud of. It's like a mix between like amplifying Gen Z, much like how you do in your podcast, but then also giving tools. Our main focus is helping people succeed in finance, education, career development. And it's actually going to be growing here pretty soon, which I'm kind of excited about. I haven't told a lot of people yet, but it's actually going to start turning into like an online networking and e-course business to kind of connect Gen Z more and give them more tools and resources outside of the podcast to help them succeed. So, yeah.
That's so great, and I'm so glad that this whole project is expanding. That is really exciting. So, you briefly talked about being nervous about leaving high school and getting older, and I would love to know more about your background and how you got to this point of hosting your own podcast and doing this work. So, can you tell me more about that path for you?
So a lot of people know this if they've like followed my page, but I was always very into business in high school. And it was primarily actually because in my high school we had like both FBLA and DECA, and it was very male dominated. And so I actually like when I joined the business classes, I kind of quickly realized like I need to take up space and represent space. And then I think it really escalated and I graduated 2020. It's like a lot of people. It was a great time to graduate high school. And I think then it went from shifting of like thinking about business to thinking about how you can make a change in business. I saw all like very quickly in high school, people start working from home, dynamics changing. And that's when I started looking into research of like, what is Gen Z going to do in the future? What trends are we going to start seeing? And I started thinking more about like marketing, not marketing, I guess it'd be more like research trends instead of just like how to amplify yourself in business. And then that goes hand in hand. If you understand the trends are going to happen, you can understand how you can position yourself better, become a better leader, get those jobs you want. Yeah, definitely escalated with high school.
I love that this whole story started with your high school classes and that you realized that you needed to take up the space and make your own space in these fields, and I think that's so inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned always being really interested in business. So, where do you see yourself going with this interest and with the projects that you're working on now? I know this is the biggest question possible, but where are you hoping to go from here?
Yeah, so something I've currently or recently actually thought about is the fact of like chasing a passion and a why instead of chasing a dollar. And that is something that we do not talk about with current like hustle culture. And when I talk about people, like people are like, oh, Bailey's like a hustler, she's doing all this. Like, I have no free time at all. But I think the reason why I do what I do and the reason like I keep going is because I see like the mission of why I do what I do. And I want Gen Z to become like Gen Z Boss to become this brand that isn't just about making $1 million. I want to actually help people progress in whatever career path they want. And I would love to continue on and doing other things of like helping women start into politics. That's a huge passion of mine too, is like I am super involved in politics and I want to be a young female entrepreneur in the next couple of years. And so having this like thing brand of like Gen Z Boss, I think just ties along with that so well. And I really just want to, I know I'll probably own multiple businesses, to be honest, but I think the idea of owning multiple businesses should not necessarily be about making all of this money. I think it should be about changing the world in places that you see need to be changed.
That's so interesting, the whole hustle culture idea. So, I would love to know there's been this whole idea of the side hustle, as you said, and side jobs. What are your thoughts on that? And especially for Gen Z, because I know that there are so many young people who have taken up these side jobs during and then after the pandemic. And I know that this is a real mental health concern, for one, because it can lead to burnout. And a lot of people picked up those side hustles during the pandemic and then maybe didn't drop them. But there are a bunch of different scenarios. And I would love to get your take on that whole topic because I know it's definitely something that's on people's minds right now and it's been in the news. And so I would just love to know, what are your thoughts on side hustles and side jobs?
I've done some research on this actually. I think a big driving factor of why we have so much, like so many hustles, is the fact that we had a pandemic so young and we saw jobs shut down. Most of us didn't have jobs for like 2 years, especially people like entry level jobs who were terminated for a lot of people. And so we picked up these side hustles and we picked up like making money on our own and becoming our own bosses. And the fact actually is that 65% of Gen Z plans to own or already owns their own business in the next 10 years. It's huge. That is the most of any generation to ever happen. And it's exciting in some parts of like we are creating the lives that we want, we're setting our own hours, we're like working. But the problem is a lot of us are doing it for the money and doing it for a quick buck and not necessarily for a mission. And that's not the case for everyone. I know tons of young entrepreneurs. I have tons of friends that are doing great things. But then there's also those like people that we think about of like, oh, there's the guy that's telling you to go buy his NFT, or there's like the person who's like selling their clothes, like their thrift store finds. So there's a lot of different types of side hustles. And I think making it like extra cash is never a bad thing. But I think we're having an issue now of people wanting to be entrepreneurs because they want to make money and not because they want to make a change or have a mission. I think if you look at the most successful businesses in the world, they started off as side hustles, you know. We've all heard of like starting off in the garage, becoming an empire in the next 20 years, but they didn't do it because they wanted to make money. They didn't do it because they wanted to have security. They did it because they had this goal and this mission, and they saw that and they made that dream come true.
I love this idea of chasing a mission and having a purpose with the work you're doing. And I think those are really important goals to keep in mind. I would also love to know, I'm sure you've had so many great conversations through the podcast and through the work you're doing. What is some of the best advice that you've ever gotten from someone? Are there any pieces of advice that have really stood out to you?
Oh my gosh. So if anyone looks into me after this, you should go to my episode about with Ashley Bennington. I actually met her through my sorority and she's an alumni. But she gave me this advice of like, the currency that I have that's more valuable than anyone else has is time. I'm young. I can fail like 100 times and I can pick myself up and keep going because I'm only 20 years old versus like someone who's like 50 trying to start something new. So that really changed my mind of when I realized that like I'm at the perfect age to just go after it. I have no, like when we're young, we don't have families, we don't have responsibilities. It's just ourselves and our goals and our passions. So that was like life changing for me when I realized that I have this valuable currency of time.
Oh, I love this advice because it's definitely something that I've learned as well. I studied abroad this past year, and there was this great attitude with a lot of the study abroad students that was pretty much like, you know what, we can make the money back, but we're only studying abroad like this once. And I just think it's so true that time is so valuable. And I love that you shared that advice. I also would love to ask you to share some business and finance advice. So, if you were talking to someone who was just starting college or they're in high school, maybe a younger Miss Baylie Jean, what advice would you want to share with them when it comes to finances or savings or anything like that? What do you wish you would have known maybe a year or a few years ago?
So I would definitely say, okay, you've all heard like expect to fail, don't be afraid to fail, but I think you should be excited to fail. And the way what do I mean by that? I'll give you examples. You should be excited to like go to an interview and be told no. And I know people are like, that's crazy, Baylie. Why would you like want to do that? But every time that you like interact with people, even if when you're rejected, you're making connections. Say like money wise, you should be excited to fail and learn. I think right now with the stock market, it's questionable for us, but we are such a great age to go in because we can kind of like test the waters a bit, realize what's working, change our financial game plan, and go invest in something else. When you are excited to fail, you're not just um, you're failing for a reason. It's questionable to say, but I'll explain this. You're failing because you want to learn something, you want to grow. If you are afraid to fail, you're not going to grow from your failure. You're just going to take a step back.
I love that advice because I think it's so true. And I think if you get in a mindset where you want to be corrected and you want to learn, then you know you're doing something right. So I would also love to know, you talked about owning multiple businesses, but still wanting to make a change and feel passionate about the work that you're doing. What type of businesses are you thinking you'd like to develop, or what type of position do you feel like you'd be passionate about doing every day?
So yeah, my ultimate goal is actually to be like a corporate trainer. And that looks like very different for everyone who's in it. But I think for me, I really want to help other people figure out how to make their businesses grow or just be in like the professional setting. I always have like side projects. I have like a list of like 20 things I want to do by the time I'm 30. But what I'm most excited for is the fact that I have time to go make a change in every single industry I want. I've always been super passionate about sustainability. I've always wanted to own a small zero waste store. I have time to do that. I always have wanted to give career coaching to other young women who are kind of like a little Miss Baylie Jean in high school. I have time to go do that. I think the biggest thing for me is like I just want to go and I never want to be afraid to enter a new industry. I think the people that are most successful are the people that are like have their hand in multiple things because then not only are you like making a difference, even if it's a small difference in all those areas, you're like learning and growing. And like I said, you're learning from your failures and you can go and take that on to your next project and your like next passion in life.
I think that's great, and I'm so excited to follow along with where you take your podcast and your business from here. So, I have one last question for you. Lots of young people, particularly college students and high school students, want to create change and they want to make a difference, but they may not know how or maybe where to get started. Do you have any advice for those people who may be listening?
Ooh, that is a great question. I think something that a lot of us aren't using now is the advice from older people. I know that we are like the frontier of a lot of things, social media, TikTok, all of this, but a lot of the stuff that we're going through, we're not the first people to go through. If you want to own a business, go find someone who does and talk to them. Mentors are so important and they're not really used in our generation as much as they haven't been in past generations. My like all of the projects I've ever done escalated so quickly when I found someone that had done something similar when they were my age, and I learned from them and grew from them. And I think that if we want to like go from point A to point B, we need to find someone who can give us value and knowledge and kind of be our cheerleaders on the side. So yeah, if there's anything that you want to accomplish in this world, I would say go find someone who motivates you, who you're inspired by, and just go talk to them.
I had so much fun talking with Baylie Jean, and I think she shared a lot of great advice throughout this episode. I think her advice about chasing a mission and doing work you're passionate about rather than chasing a dollar was really interesting. Time is the most important resource we have, and our time should be spent doing something that's fun, something that's fulfilling, or something that makes us better. Odd jobs and side hustles to make a quick buck may not be worth the time spent doing them, so we have to ask ourselves if it's worth it. Same goes for choosing a career later in life. Are you chasing the money you'll make in a job? Will that money make you happy, even if you don't feel fulfilled working there? There are so many questions to consider, and I'm so glad that I got to talk with Baylie Jean and listen to all of her advice, especially about being intentional with what we're chasing, because change comes when you chase a mission instead of a dollar. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can connect with Baylie Jean on Instagram at Miss Baylie Jean to get connected with her, and you can find Gen Z Boss Podcast on Instagram as well at Gen Z Boss Podcast. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at bethechangepodcast. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys!